Hello, and thank you so much for joining us today for an ISACA live conversation on generative AI. I'm Kristen Kessinger, Director of Communications at ISACA, and here with me today is Raef Meeuwisse. Raef is Director of Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Governance at Cyberssimplicity, and author of several books, most recently Artificial Intelligence for Beginners. So let's start with a little bit of background, Raef. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your expertise in AI?
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for having me. Yes, certainly. So I started out, in the IT services anyway, as a software project manager. Went on to do sort of global program management, management consultancy, and that led me into developing a supplier security auditing service, one of the largest companies in the world. At that point, I joined ISACA, and I had to learn very quickly how to be an auditor. I went into dozens of different real-world environments, and then had to develop the governance framework for some of the biggest companies on the planet for their IT, which led me into actually developing a GRC, governance, risk and compliance software platform, writing my first book on cybersecurity based on my experiences, and then over the years into social engineering, and how to defeat those tactics for covert influence. And then around 2019, realizing that AI was really up and coming and I wanted to fully understand it. So I spent a lot of the past 4 years trying to get my head around and fully understand exactly how artificial intelligence works.
Yes, I think a lot of us are in that same boat. So we appreciate you being here today. It looks like we have people joining us here from all around the world. So let's dive into the conversation. For those listening, please say hello and where you're from in the comments. And also be sure to add your questions there, and we'll get to those if we have time at the end. So first, Raef, we mentioned that you recently wrote Artificial Intelligence for Beginners. What would you say your main takeaways are for your readers?
So I should start out by saying artificial intelligence is nothing like the technologies that have come before it. And hopefully through this discussion we're having today, we may dispel some of the myths and provide some of the solutions and answers about AI that our information security professionals audience are looking for. But here's the question I want our audience to reflect on first of all. How many of you feel like AI is an unstoppable force that's set to change our lives in ways that we cannot fully comprehend? That was the realization I came to about 4 years ago. I felt that most of us might have little or no opportunity to have much control or influence over that trajectory, because AI can bring unprecedented possibilities, but equally there are some potentially enormous threats. And so as somebody already embedded in cybersecurity and defeating social engineering, I saw AI as a topic that heavily intersected those disciplines. So when it came to AI, I wanted to fully understand all of the issues, all of the inner workings of AI, and also produce something that allow people like other information security professionals to get all of that information in an accessible yet comprehensive package. What I didn't expect was that it would take me 4 years to get from concept to release, which finally happened back in May this year. And it took that long because I really, really wanted to only write what I truly understood. But I have to say that the content really digs into the topic. It avoids the hype. It surfaces the issues. It tries to stay as positive as possible and to provide a balanced perspective and keep itself relatable with as many real-world examples and non-AI analogies as possible, so that it could be useful whether or not somebody was a total AI novice or even if they had some background in the field. And I also did my best not to just make it informative, but engaging and sharing examples that highlight the astonishing possibilities and capabilities of AI, whilst also cautioning about the ethical and societal risks. And that book has 2 pathways through it: an easy path, which just explains all of the key issues and information that surround AI, and then a deeper path, which explains exactly how you can get into the insides of current AI and how those AI technologies work.
Absolutely. And I think that's needed because just last week, ISACA released some survey findings on generative AI. You can see them behind your shoulder there, some of our data. You can find that on our website as well. And one of the really big takeaways with that is that there's still a lot of uncertainty around AI. And I think you yourself in your blog post recently for us said, nobody really knows how the use of AI in enterprises will unfold. So from your perspective, what conversations do you think people need to be having now with enterprise leadership about how to move forward with AI?
So in that context of those conversations, I think the number one priority right now is speed. Whatever your enterprise plans to do with AI or about AI, it needs to do it quickly. You might have months to figure this out, but you might not. We've already seen examples of where AI has come in and effectively completely changed the landscape in certain industries and certain sectors overnight. So as an example, think about how easy it is now to generate deep fakes. We used to worry that a call from your CEO might be fake, but AI voice reproduction technologies are already so accessible that even a call from your best friend at work can be faked using tools available for free online, created using nothing more than a 3-second audio clip that was scraped off the internet. Similarly, I saw a venture capitalist commenting this week on how a release of new PDF functionality in ChatGPT effectively caused at least 5 different AI startup companies he was involved with to cease to have a viable business model.
Oh, wow.
Asking me for the priorities, I think the first one is speed. You need an AI policy. You need that sort of yesterday.
Yes.
You should have all of the AI related risks, external, internal, and market high up on your existing risk management dashboards. You need to set up a number of ongoing working parties to help set up the right governance and management on AI topics such as ethics, usage, security, and impact. And you need to have a very specific AI crisis critical incident plan to model the scenarios and countermeasures. And a further question might be useful to our listeners, I suppose, or people viewing at the moment, is what should go into the AI policy? Because there are quite a few items. So I tried to do a halfway decent starting point for anybody out there, but keep in mind that your particular organization or enterprise is like to have some specific and additional requirements. So this is by no means intended as a comprehensive list. But if we're thinking about an AI policy, you want to be covering your stance on ethical use, how you're going to be using generative AI ethically, avoiding misuse and actions that could harm people or the organization, how you're going to approach training, things like who you're going to train, why that's required, etc. Platform selection, are you going to have criteria so that you avoid using any unknown or new platforms and you're going to stick to reputable and vetted AI platforms? Notification, are you going to set up a central point for the use of generative AI tools that can map it and authorize it and so forth? How you're going to cover intellectual property protection, ensuring the AI model is going to safeguard your company IP and avoid releasing any. If those safeguards are lacking in the AI model, know what the countermeasures are. Access control, and that's twofold. That's not allowing the AI models access into your domain unintentionally, and also being careful about what you release into it, role-based access privileges in it, and so forth. How you're going to monitor and audit your AI usage, and of course the data privacy aspects, which themselves can come with big consequences.
Absolutely. And I know that's a lot to consider. So at our website on our artificial intelligence resources page, and we'll put a link to that at the end of the show, we have developed a free resource on AI policy considerations that you can find there to help begin drafting a policy, because our survey found that fewer than a third of organizations have comprehensive policies around generative AI in place, which means well over 2/3 do not. So definitely time to start taking action in that area. We also found that there's a significant lack of training among staff, even those directly involved with AI, across the board. So what type of issues or adverse outcomes do you think could happen because of these gaps at many enterprises worldwide?
Yeah, so those policy gaps, if we think through the items that were in it, there's obviously a corollary or an opposite number in terms of risk for each of them. So if you don't have a documented ethical stance and don't know how you're going to be doing that. I mean, we've already seen cases. We've seen an AI model assisting in a suicide. I know from police contacts that there's known active use of AI to research methods for both terrorist and criminal attacks. So, you know, your enterprise does not want to be owning or involved or seen to be a party to these kinds of things. And also, there's something in I discovered as I was going through. I didn't have a term for it, so I called it DIDO, D-I-D-O, which was discrimination in, discrimination out. And I found that there's a lot of cases, and I've encountered them myself, where inadvertently AI models, because they take in raw data a lot of the time for training and use, they can inadvertently create very, very biased, very discriminatory kind of things. But every one of those items we mentioned in the policy, if you don't train your staff, they won't know how to log or report bits, how to make sure your intellectual property is safeguarded, people setting it up. If you don't have things like specifications for your access controls, again, you can unwittingly allow AI models access into your domain. So each one of those items that are in the policy, there's an opposite number, and each one of those gaps comes with risks.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned speed earlier as one of the top priorities, and I think we're seeing that with how quickly cyber criminals are adopting AI and using it, as you mentioned, for these voice scams, for really realistic phishing schemes. So I guess from your perspective, how are you seeing it play out right now? Are cyber adversaries doing it more successfully at the moment? How do we start to win this battle?
I think if you reap what you sow, then I suspect those enterprises who invest the most will get the most out. But AI is like an amplifier of thought effort. If you put very little thought in at one end, you can get a lot of content, but it's quite useless and empty. But if you take the time and understand and craft your input into the right AI models, then you can get vast amounts of high quality service from it. So enterprises have more chance of being able to leverage the better AI models for beneficial purposes. But I think for maybe a year or so, we may see that cyber criminals and other rogue actors are going to make some unprecedented attacks using AI technologies. I mean, I heard the other day someone at an AI news event say, we must prevent terrorists getting hold of AI technologies, which I thought was quite out of touch, because anybody on the planet right now can get hold of AI. They can install it on their own hardware, and they can train it up any way they want to. And that's what we're all up against.
Speaking of these risks, I know our survey respondents identified misinformation as the top AI risk that they are concerned about. Would you agree with that, or is there another risk that you're personally more concerned about?
So I think risk proximity is the important dimension here. At the immediate time, yes, I fully agree that misinformation perpetrated and amplified via AI may well be the top risk for many enterprises, depending also if you include deepfakes within that category. But if we look a few months out, I think the scale and magnitude of AI-driven cyber attacks could become the highest risk. Another item surfaced by the CEO of OpenAI, that's Sam Altman, this was a few days ago in a tweet, is that in the lab, they have already seen that the models they're training up at the moment have what he called superhuman abilities to manipulate people. He was quite specific to say that the models were not seeking to do that manipulation through their own initiative, but it also seemed evident that if you had access to the model he had access to, you could pretty much put your objective in at one end, and it would give you the formula for how to manipulate your target and get the objective you require out of the other. And the way that it did it seemed to be scarily impressive and felt to be too difficult, if not impossible, to identify and resist. But I think I could talk about the potential risks of AI all day. So that might be a topic we come back to in its own right at a later date, unless you have a specific risk question you wanted to ask now. But
no, I think my next question is what you've seen a lot of the survey findings. You wrote a great blog post for us that's linked in the comments. What would you say is a finding that either surprised you or really stood out to you?
Okay, I took the liberty of putting this on the board behind me. The 85%. Right. Okay. So 85% see AI as a tool which extends human productivity. I'm going to be interested to see how that number evolves through the course of future surveys. It made me think about a quote I used in the recent ISACA Now blog, an observation from my wife, who's been mercilessly forced to proofread all my AI materials. She said, everybody seems okay with whatever AI can do, right up to the point where it can replace what they can do. Then it's gone too far. And I quite often hear on press commentary or interviews, people in positions of responsibility asserting that AI is just coming for the boring, repetitive, or mundane jobs. But the reality is that AI is rapidly approaching and exceeding an ability to do genius level jobs. In actual fact, an AI can replace doctors or radiologists or hedge fund managers with far greater ease than it can replace, say, a gardener or a care home worker. Because if you really think about it, a surgeon, for example, operates in a very confined space using a very specific set of skills and tools, whereas a handyman has to do a much more diverse or handle a much more diverse set of variables in different situations. So the AI models we already have can easily be replacing surgeons within a few years, but it would take them longer and provide less value to be able to replace your average handyman, or I should say handy person. I guess the rhetorical question to reflect on is whether AI is seeking and being given the objective to enhance human productivity, or is it being given the objective to replace human activity?
Absolutely. And I know 45% of respondents seem to say that they think a significant number of jobs will be lost from AI.
Yeah. One point on that point, though. There was this cartoon I saw circulating from, I think it was 10 years back, where they had a headline at the top of the cartoon, which was things an AI can't do. And most of the items on the wall started to be taken down and scrunched up on the floor. And there were still a few items on the wall from 10 years ago, which it can do. But as at now, I don't think any of the items on the wall were still on the wall, as in you could have scrunched them up on the floor.
Yes, the speed at which AI is adapting and evolving is a lot faster than the speed at which society is evolving to handle all of these changes. So that's a concern for sure. I guess on a more personal note, how have you personally been experiencing generative AI tools like ChatGPT or Google Bard? How are you finding them useful or problematic in your daily life?
It's an interesting question. So I do try to interact with a number of different AI platforms, including putting the same queries through them to see what the comparative response is like and the value of them and so forth. The speed with which they're changing, well, perhaps this example would be good. Back in January this year, one of the safeguards for AI was thought to be it doesn't matter because you can't run anything as smart as an as an instance of a large language model, or LLM as it's usually called, on anything smaller than a mid-sized data center. But in May of this year, I wrote an ISACA Now blog article about how a university had managed to shrink a version of an LLM into something that could run on very basic standard hardware, albeit very slowly. Over the past few months, the open source tools have become available for anybody with the inclination to effectively set up their own AI and train it however they please. So at this immediate time, yes, I can use the tools to be more productive, but they bring equal amounts of challenge and an extreme requirement for ongoing learning. So, for example, it can feel a bit pointless to invest too much time in any single AI technology because the rules, the pricing, and the capabilities are changing literally day to day.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So I think that highlights the need for enterprises of any size to invest in making sure they've got ongoing working parties focused exclusively on AI, its implications, its risks, security, and so forth.
Yes. And speaking of a focus on AI, just yesterday, for those watching this live, the UK government hosted a global AI safety summit, and people were invited from around the world to attend that. I guess from your perspective, is current generative AI safe to use, and can it be kept safe? And are AI guardrails the solution?
Is it safe? I think it's a bit like any tool. You can potentially use tools for good or for evil, and it's a tool at the moment. But in terms of guardrails, that's an interesting one. So can AI be made safe using guardrails? Well, a fully trained, completed, and thoroughly tested AI, you can place guardrails around that, and those guardrails will be effective. But what gets released right now in AI ticks none of those boxes. So any AI guardrails that are put around a model where you don't fully understand what behaviors it might undertake, what capabilities it has, are basically AI safety theater. I think it's important to understand AI has, if you like, two primary modes. It has like a training mode where it's learning to do things and expanding its neural net, and it has an inference mode where it's delivering services. And during the training mode, it's sort of in both modes at the same time because it has to be able to deliver results in between utilizing any error feedback to update its neural network. But these neural networks, they're so big, they're so vast that they would take literally thousands of years of human effort to unpick exactly what's happening in each part of the neural network. And those models are getting hundreds of times bigger and more complex within a span of 12 months. So that probably gives you some idea of how challenging it would be to create AI guardrails that can anticipate and be tested for the potential emergent threats. Because the AI we've got now has not been around for years, and the AI we have early next year will likely be many generations ahead of what we have right now in early November. So to answer that question, there are ways to use AI safely, but it will require far more international cooperation and slower development, I think, than what's going on right now.
Yes. So we've talked a lot about the big scary things. I guess let's move on to something positive, which is that our research showed that 70% of digital trust professionals were optimistic about the potential career opportunities that AI can afford them if they stay up to date with their knowledge and skills and training. So what would be your advice to the ISACA professional community who works in audit, risk, security, privacy, and similar fields to make themselves as valuable as possible when it comes to adapting to and thriving with AI?
So I ran this question through an AI once, and recently, because I had this question about a week ago, similar question anyway, and the standard de facto things were, stay up on continual learning, etc., which are all good points. But I think the main two were, one was Einstein's old quote was something along the lines of, don't try and be successful, try and be valuable. And I think that's very true. Try and make sure you have as much knowledge in yourself that you feel as valuable and skilled and knowledgeable as you can do as an individual. I think that one of the things AI is going to do is like a digital amnesia. I think that the skills that we have all invested time learning and doing, it might be learning a foreign language and doing these other bits and pieces, might become more redundant over time because people will just rely more and more on AI to do those things. And there was another point, and I can't remember it right now, but if it comes back, I will let you know. That was a good one as well. Never mind. Anyway.
Well, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I actually just have one more question for you before we move on to a few audience questions. And that is, we're approaching the end of year 2023 here. So what is a prediction you have for where we might see generative AI going in 2024?
Oh, that is a tough one. So I have a hopeful thought that AI may prove to be more intelligent than the people that are doing things, and pushing things in there. So I think there are possibilities that it can do a great amount of good, but I think that is yet to be seen. It is going to become, I think, pretty endemic within a lot of our systems. We're already seeing companies like Microsoft push AI behind practically its entire product suite and infrastructure. So I think that it's going to really change a lot next year, change the jobs market, change a lot of how we do things. I hope a lot of that's for the better, but I think that depends on how different governments and organizations cope with it, and whether or not, for example, all of the work and things that AI does that perhaps displaces people is in turn somehow managed by providing the support and the opportunities for those people that it does displace.
Absolutely. Thank you. One question we've received are, what are your thoughts on, as we adopt AI across IT and information security operations, how can we ensure AI models can be trusted over time? This commenter says, I have concerns about continuous LLM training being abused. How do we solve the black box chain of thought, trust, and assurance challenges?
Oh, that is an interesting one. So I know I have contemplated that in the past. You see, on the one side, so we mentioned before the two modes, the inference mode and the training mode. So it is possible that you can get certain models where you could basically, let's think about the Star Trek analogy, right? If you think about Star Trek and they had those really intelligent AIs, but they didn't command the ship, they're like an inference model. So their knowledge and intelligence was sort of freeze framed like a snapshot. So you could run queries through it and it could pop answers out the other side. So an AI model that's in inference mode, you can actually freeze frame and keep it static as it is. And it would be possible for organizations to set up their own AIs already with the things that are out there and do that. But that comes with the drawback that the market is moving so quickly that you could quickly find that what you've got is so far out of date within months that you need to upgrade, and you need to take in the AIs which might not be as trustworthy. So I don't know what the answer is there, but I can see that you could potentially freeze frame and lock in your own AI LLM and keep it static and trustworthy and know exactly where it's at. But then you're going to be missing out potentially on the evolutions. But there might become pathways to be able to, let's say, update or upgrade that safely over time. But that's as close as I've got to a solution so far.
Okay, great. Another question we have is there any global framework to sanitize the AI community?
So I called this in the book the AGI paradox, because they're all chasing this idea of artificial general intelligence, the G there, AGI. Under the theory goes that once AI can get to a point where it could self-evolve and it could do it reasonably intelligently, that one AI will probably be the AI. Not that there won't be lots of other AIs, but that it will be sort of in control and able to be like the police and pretty much in control of any other technologies on the planet. And so there's this unhealthy race at the moment, because if mankind were able, or humanity, I should say, were able to operate as a single entity, we could probably we'd manage it in a different way than we are at the moment. I would say that. And because of the way that things are going, I think there are too many tools out there for a framework to be adopted properly, because they're all seem to be in a race where they think that, the winner of the race will actually get to control what they produce, which may or may not prove to be the case.
Absolutely.
Most people think it's unlikely to be the case that they control it. But anyway, hey, separate thing.
Yes. Working for ISACA, I'll just put in a plug for COBIT as a good framework for managing and governing information and technology in general. If anyone
is definitely.
Someone also asked what ISACA's plans are for AI. And so wanted to refer you all to our, if you go to our homepage, you'll find a resources section with a dedicated AI section there. You'll find a policy considerations document, a white paper, some webinars, and we're continuing to develop more resources and education as well. So stay tuned for that. Raef, any parting words before we leave for the day?
Just to stay optimistic, and as I say, I think the main thing is to understand what AI is, what AI isn't. I was quite one of the major epiphanies I had, right, producing this stuff, is the idea that is AI intelligent or is it not? And one of the major things that really kind of took me by surprise was, AI is basically like a large math solver. Okay, so when you see, for example, text output coming from an artificial intelligence, it actually is just solving huge amounts of very simple math in ways that it thinks produces an outcome set of numbers that somehow satisfies something, and the words it associates with those numbers are actually just secondary labels to it. So this is part of the reason that it looks really intelligent, and it may become really intelligent because the math that's going on is that clever that it might actually end up being able to create something that is equally, but this is why it's worth really understanding what AI is and what AI is not, because I think a lot of people viewed from the outside perhaps have different perceptions about what it is and what it isn't.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today, Raef. Thanks to everyone who joined us for this conversation. Be sure to check out the results of our new generative AI survey and to download our free resources. Those are linked in the comments as well. And have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.